Inside IT Automation, a ScriptRunner production.
Yeah, hello and welcome to a new episode of our Inside IT Automation video series. And today I'm very happy to have Jakub Jareš with me. Hi,
hello.
Jakub. Great to taking the time. And I'm looking forward to have an interesting conversation about your IT journey, your PowerShell journey, and of course, Pester, and how you came the main maintainer of Pester and what it does and things like that. But maybe for the beginning, you can give us a background of your life in IT, how you started, how you came across PowerShell, things like that.
Okay, yeah, I'm also looking forward to have this discussion with you. So let me start with my background. Somewhere maybe in 2008, 2010, I think I started working in IT. And at the beginning, I was working on migration of banking systems from Windows 2000 to Windows Vista, which is what was the new operating system that the bank was moving to. And I was basically tasked with just filling out information into Excel. And that was the start of me in IT. And then we had a lot of interesting kinds of problems, like how do we take this old software and run it on new Windows? And even though Windows are really great with backwards compatibility, it doesn't always work great with like custom developed software and so on. So we had to come up with a lot of things, and I learned about the application compatibility toolkit, if someone still knows what that is. And I was trying to move all these applications, and I was solving those small tasks that people were giving me sometimes, and then I kind of profiled myself as the go-to person for the stuff that the other people couldn't solve. And so that was the beginning of my career. I moved from just filling out Excels to moving those applications. Then we had another task, which was the beginning of my PowerShell life. And that was to automate power consumption on PCs and laptops within the bank. So right now, what you have in Windows is that you click, I want to do maintenance here, or my active hours are like this, or figure out the active hours for me from when I work. In Windows Vista and Windows 2000, you didn't have anything like that. So I was writing some scripts through the powercfg.exe to automate basically the laptops to stay awake for maintenance during the night, and for the normal computers to consume as little additional power when they don't have to be up. So somewhere between 8 and 7 o'clock in the evening, or 8 in the morning, 7 o'clock in the evening, you had to stay awake, and then the rest you should consume as little power as you can, because we had thousands upon thousands of PCs. And I tried to automate this through PowerShell, but I failed greatly. I was working on it for 2 months, and I had code, but it worked here, worked there. Then I always changed something and it broke and so on. And so I figured out there is something like testing, right, in software. So I started looking up on testing and found testing for PowerShell, but for C# at first, and for C, and for other stuff. And then I found that there's also a testing framework for PowerShell. There were 3 or 4 at that time. And I simply chose Pester because it had the most features. And it seemed like it's, the most approachable. At that time, Pester had the basics, there were some assertions, there was mocking already. It was version 1 or 2, I'm not sure, when I joined, and it wasn't very active. None of those testing frameworks in PowerShell were very active because people simply weren't doing any testing at that time. So I was in a kind of, a unique situation where I wanted a product from PowerShell rather than some just kind of automation. I wanted a system. Maybe in retrospect, it would have been easier to just write it in C#, but I wrote it in PowerShell because I was at a course of PowerShell for a week. And so I picked up Pester, I started writing tests, and I found it very interesting. So I started also writing articles about it. At that time, it was for PowerShell magazine. And people started picking up on testing. Then Dave Wyatt joined me at Pester, and for a long time he was doing the promotion, propagation, writing a lot of code in Pester as well. And testing started to pick up. We were talking at conferences about it and getting people to know it and so on. And so that way, kind of Pester became the testing solution for PowerShell. And all the other testing frameworks kind of either died off or didn't match the features that we have. Or maybe there wasn't enough interest or enough people to using them. And Pester basically like crossed the mass where everyone who comes and wants to be testing in PowerShell goes to Pester directly, because we already have the majority of the people.
Nice. So yeah, yes. And now Pester is the standard for testing in this space, right? I mean,
yeah, I hope to think so.
I just checked the numbers on the PowerShell gallery, so that over 24 million downloads on the gallery. I mean, this is whoa.
I haven't looked in a while. Compared to like some of the Azure modules and so on, it's minuscule. But for me, it's still a lot, like 15 million downloads.
It's really up there with a lot of well-loved community modules in the PowerShell world, I would say. So that's really great. So you moved from using Pester so you morphed into the guy who is also in charge of really bringing it forward and improving it.
That's true. Yeah. How this happened was that at that time I was using PowerGUI. I don't know if you still remember it.
Yeah.
It had two modes, the dark mode and the light mode. And in the light mode, you had like a yellow color that wasn't really a lot of contrast with the background. And all the output of Pester was kind of done for the dark output. And so when you were running in the light mode, you couldn't see the color. So that was my first pull request ever on GitHub to add additional theme to Pester, where you can choose if the colors are for the light or the dark background, so you can see them better. And you can even find it on GitHub. I think it's a good example of like a first pull request that I ever did, where it says, I actually don't know anything that I'm doing. Please help me. And Scott, the guy Scott Motz, who started Pester, was very accommodating. And later he told me, I wanted someone to like take this project away from me because I didn't want to focus on it anymore. But that's how you do it. You build a community and then you find someone who is willing to inherit it. And so it wasn't just a single pull request. It was many pull requests that I did over the time. And then Scott came to me and told me, you look like you are very interested in this. Do you want to own it? I said, yes, of course. And since then, I'm the owner of Pester. And I was accompanied with many other people during the time, but I'm staying there like the only constant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're then once you joined Microsoft, I think a few years ago.
That's true. 5 years ago.
And you're still continuing to be the Pester guy, right?
Right. Not at work, but only outside of work.
Yeah.
But so after I kind of mastered, and I don't like to say it like this, but after I kind of grew up being a little tired of just scripting and doing this stuff where I couldn't create more applications, more things. I wanted to do like UIs and so on, and it wasn't very easy with PowerShell. I moved to C# and I wrote some C# code, some few systems, and then I decided to move on from like the administration part rather to software development. I joined a consultancy company. I was doing some projects there. One of them was really nice. That was a software for cranes, where we were deploying some software on like the big container cranes. It didn't do anything that could kill a person, because you cannot give those responsibilities to the managed code with all the GC and so on. But like when you press a honk button we had like an Angular front end that connected to C# server that compiled to something that talked to a Siemens controller on the crane, and so that way you like honk the horn, or you increase the temperature within the cabin on the AC and so on. So that was really an interesting project. And then after that, I found out that they're starting development center in Microsoft in Prague, and I was hired there originally to work on networking on the BCL, on the base class library, but the team that was responsible for testing was dissolving, and they were looking to move it somewhere. And because I already had experience with creating testing frameworks, I was the person that kind of was asked to inherit it.
Okay,
and ever since then, I own it. So if you do .NET Test, it's going to our team and to my wonderful colleagues at Microsoft.
Okay, cool. Very interesting. So let's say for someone who's maybe not familiar with Pester, if you would have to describe it, what would you say?
Right. So Pester is a testing framework. It's there for you to automate the things to ensure your software is working correctly. And how you can start with that is that you do the thing that you would do manually, and you just write it down into code. So if you're writing some function, typically you will write it, you will import it, then you will call it, and you will give it some data, and then you will look at it and see, okay, this is doing the correct thing. Like this is giving me the right output, or this is actually restarting my computer when I call it. And so Pester has tools that allow you to do all of this automatically. So for checking the output, we have assertions, which are just ifs, which compare two values. And if they are not, they don't have the expected correlation, like they are not equal, it will throw an exception. It's simple as that. And then we have mocking, which allows you to check if something was called without actually calling it. So like if you're testing, will this script, when I call it, restart my computer in 5 minutes? You can call the function, maybe wait 5 minutes, not an ideal test, and then check this function that's called restart computer was called, and you would do that through mocking. So pretty much it's just a list of things that you need to do to ensure that your software is working correctly. And we are giving you templates or a simple way that's common to everyone to do this kind of thing. And this is also how a lot of people approach this. They took Pester as a kind of automation engine and automated a lot of other stuff. So for example, if you take DBHX tests against a deployed database to make sure that the database is deployed correctly and is doing the right things. Then you have master, which does the same thing with security. It looks at your environment and checks against a list of security rules if everything is correct. And so it's not just software testing, because PowerShell is kind of a glue that glues together different systems, different things. You don't really look usually at like units of like tiny pieces of code that you would need to test, but rather than that, more a system or a big kind of integration between two things.
Okay, so there are other parts that use Pester in the background to do, let's say, the heavy lifting and to use this framework. Nice. So this is so if you look at Pester, so what would you say is the coolest thing that is part of the solution where people say, wow, this is great that it's part of Pester, and they love it, where you get feedback also from the community and people will love it?
I think there's a lot of things to love, but there's also one thing that people always mention, and that's mocking, because it sounds and looks scary, and internally it works in a very complicated way. But I think if you ask me to pick up one of the coolest things in Pester, that would be mocking. To ensure where like we run in the correct scope, we inject the functions into the correct place, all the code that's internally written that has to run without the user observing it running, and so on. So for me, that's like one of the biggest features that we have, because it enables a lot of scenarios, but it's also kind of scary to people for some reason.
Because they don't trust the simulation, so to speak, or what would you think?
I don't know. I think it's just like hard to understand how it works, works internally, and how it works in general. Maybe this is a thing that we should study more. Do some A/B testing with people to get rid of this aura of scaredness from walking.
Or just to, let's say, just trust the magic that happens internally, right? Because I mean, they can see the results. So I guess once they've done it and they see, oh yeah, it looks like it works like I expected, they're happy, right?
It might be also, it's not like something you would normally do. Like if you write code and you have no idea about testing, you write a function and the function does something. Like you have ifs and you provide it with data and then it does something. At no point you would go and you would just say, yeah, I want to just like do this kind of magic to substitute something that's happening somewhere. It's not like a gesture that you would normally want to do in your software development. If you look at assertions, you can see to do the same thing in your normal programming. Like you get a value, you compare it to something else, and then you either go this way or that way. But with mocking, it's kind of different, right? Plus Pester, since its beginning, is written with this kind of DSL language where we define functions and then we give them script blocks, and it looks different than the rest of how you would write PowerShell. Which for me is like one of the gripes that I have with Pester. I tried to change it, but it's not changeable in any way that would make sense and would still be so convenient for people to use. Plus, a lot of other places started using this kind of DSL structure within their scripts. So people are getting more and more used to it, I think, and seeing it in more and more places.
Okay, interesting. So, but also what you say, I think there is some, as you already mentioned, there's some educational stuff involved to get people, number one, to learn how to properly test software, and then step two, how to use Pester in the best possible way. Are there any specific resources people can, let's say, if people want to start using it, where would they go to?
So they can either go to pester.dev. We have all our documentation in there for every single version of Pester. There is a quick start guide, which we wrote, and I think that has a lot of really nice examples of how you can start, what to do, how you can test a very basic function. Then I also have a playlist on YouTube if you like watching videos more, where I added all, my presentations from PSCon, FIU, and other presentations that I find useful. I also order them by the level of kind of difficulty or where you should start and how you should progress. And then it's just practice, I think. I also submitted for PowerShell Conference Europe a workshop, Learn Yourself Pester. So if it's accepted and someone wants to come, then this would be a nice hands-on.
Okay, cool. So that would be a good reason to come to Malmö, right?
Yep.
In June this year. Awesome. Cool. So we will definitely put the links to the pages, to the addresses you just mentioned into the description, so people can start testing it and learning more and getting in touch with the community, right? I mean, this is something that we always experience, that it's, no matter what you do in the PowerShell space, you always have people in the community that are willing to help and to support.
Yeah, that's a great point. So at this point, it's not just me who knows Pester, it's most of the community who knows it. And there are some people who are very active on Discord, very active on other places. And if you reach out within the community, there's always someone who comes and helps, which I think it's really amazing about PowerShell community.
Absolutely. And so let's say in particular to Pester, so how many pull requests, questions, and so on you get typically in a month or so?
There are not so many pull requests or not so many questions, maybe in tens. Definitely not hundreds or thousands. Also, the product is pretty polished now. So we have documentation. We have a lot of the features working the way we want them to work. I think there are better channels to ask, like the Discord channel, where you can ask and get feedback immediately rather than sending a discussion to GitHub and waiting for a few days or maybe a few weeks. Also, I think the documentation is great, and it's searchable, so you can find your answers, their videos, stuff like that. So there's a huge amount of content on the internet already that you can find, and where you can find your answers, hopefully.
Awesome. And people need to remember it's a side project, right? It's not someone who's completely professionally just doing that. So it's you and other people who want to bring this.
That's true. So currently it's me and Frode Flatten. It would be really great if either me or him could do this professionally. Like we would get paid by either someone or some kind of employer or sponsor to work directly on this. But at the moment, I at Microsoft don't work on Pester. I could see so many things that I would be able to do if I had time to work on it, like every day for weeks or months. I think when I was doing Pester 5, that took me overall like 3 or 4 weeks of work, and then all the documentation and all the other stuff. But if you split this into this kind of open source evening approach, where you do like 1 hour here, 1 hour there, half a weekend here, it takes you months and months of the real time between when stuff is done and when you started it. So working full time on this would be a dream of mine, to be able to like dedicate 1 day of the week to just open source development, be it Pester or Profiler or any other kind of thing that I will work on in the future. But
and let's say what would be one of the things that you would immediately start doing? So things that you already think, I would like to do that. That would be cool.
So we have like a plan for Pester 6 where we want to change some of the defaults. I want to finish up the assertions that I moved from the assert module that I wrote a while ago. The biggest feature there is like structural equivalence of objects. So you take an object that you expect, an object that you got, which would be the actual, and then you say these two should be equal, and it goes through all the collections, through all the hash tables, through every single property on that object and compares them. You can also say like, this is the expected object, only compare what's exactly on this if you get like much bigger object on this other side. And that's a thing that I wrote for the assert like a long time ago, but people weren't using it for some reason, because I don't know why it's so hard to install additional module, but every time I get asked when it's moving to Pester, and now it's finally moving to Pester in Pester 6.
Nice.
But there is a lot of stuff that you need to do. Like I had to change a lot of the code. I have to write documentation. I will have to write documentation. I haven't written all the documentation yet. And so that would be the first thing I would start on. Then there are some changes in the runtime that I want to change or to make, where we would discover and run kind of in the same file. Because right now you discover everything and then you run the tests, and this brings some problems if you import modules or force import modules, because then the session states are different and so on. A lot of internal details, but it would also allow us to be more streamlined when we execute. So maybe finally PowerShell's own tests would be able to move to the new Pester version, because they have so many tests and so many things that it would maybe require a lot of memory to run them, just because we collect everything in a single tree. And they already had some problems before where the output was so big that Azure DevOps couldn't handle it and so on. So this would be one thing that would enable PowerShell itself to be tested with Pester 6 rather than Pester 4 that they are using right now.
Okay. I mean, that would be a great step forward. So talking about version 6, any timeline you can mention, or it depends?
It really depends on how much time I will get to work on it, because there's a lot of stuff. Originally, I wanted to do it like just before the next PowerShell Conf, which is usually the time where I kind of focus on adding some values or adding like new things to Pester. But that seems kind of impossible to be done by that time. So a year or maybe 2.
Okay.
That's the timeline.
Okay, we will wait. So awesome. So yeah, I mean, we are in 2025 now. Of course, I have to ask you an AI question. So do you see any connection, any benefits, any things that you see where Pester and AI can work together and benefit from each other?
I think so, yes. At least we could use it to like analyze errors that you get. So that would be one thing that would be very useful. I hope if there was a good integration with the IDE in which you would be developing, like VS Code. There you would get an error. You could get Copilot to automatically analyze it for you, fix the code, and that way, I think that's the ideal use case to do this. AI itself is already able to write your tests for you and get a lot of them right. So that's another use that you can leverage. Nothing revolutionary, and
but well, in a way it is, because it helps a lot of people. Maybe even with starting with Pester, if they're not that experienced, and then they can use AI to take the first steps, to get the ball rolling, and then, as you mentioned, to improve what happens in the pipeline with actually analyzing the errors, and maybe even giving some suggestions, maybe not really solving it, but pointing to the right direction. I think this is what
I think that's one of the challenge that you have with AI, because in the end it requires a lot of computation power. Analyzing stuff is not free, and so if you will, every time you get an error, you will have to send a lot of context for the AI to be able to analyze it. It's useful in the interactive scenarios, but maybe not on CI. But then what do you do if you have an error on CI? Maybe like you on demand ask it to solve the problem for you, something like this. But if it went the step forward where you would automatically get the solution on every single error that you have and got a pull request to fix that error, that would be awesome. But you also have to spend money on it, and it might not be always right, but hopefully it will be. Yeah. So I think there are a lot of places where you can leverage AI to your advantage. But right now, we don't have any plans in Pester to integrate this, especially because you have to have some kind of subscription to something. And that would probably mean that we would have to ship more libraries together with the product that not everyone would use.
Yeah, and you have to create more dependencies and things like that. Yeah.
We also don't have any information about if there's any demand, because I cannot go and put telemetry inside of the module. That's not the usual thing that people do, even though I would love to have it. Like I would love to get metrics on how people are using Pester, how many people are actually using it, because we only have the download count basically.
Yeah. I mean, but you could make it optional, right? If to people to kind of.
I can, but I doubt anyone would opt in. I could make it by default opted in, but then people would have to opt out, and it's just like too much hurdle And we saw similar stuff happening in the .NET space, where there was additional telemetry and people really didn't like it. So for the information that I don't strictly need, but would be nice to have, I don't want to hurt the product by doing this. So.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah, awesome. So as you already mentioned, you're very active in the community. And by the way, we met end of November in the PowerShell Saturday over here in
that was an awesome event. That was really nice.
This was really great to see you there. So any other events planned for 2025 where people can meet you?
I don't really have anything, but now that I tested that I can just take a car and drive to Germany or Austria, I actually have one. So I want to do more meetups in this area. I already talked with with Yevgeny, I think, about a meetup in Berlin.
Okay, great.
And that would be in May, I think 15th of May, but I'm not 100% sure. But I would want to do more places. I know that Stuttgart probably has an active PowerShell community.
Yeah, we have one here too, together with Ryan, where we are online only, but
we can talk and we can do more events together.
Yes, absolutely. And then you can come back to the Technic Museum to check out more of the interesting stuff over here for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. And then PSCon for you, if your talk gets accepted. Yeah. Let's hope that this works out well. Awesome. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Jakub. This was a lot of interesting insights, and I think really people who maybe are not familiar with Pester yet learned about what it does and how it is a good idea to use it to start have a proper testing framework for whatever you do with PowerShell. So
thank you as well.
Thanks
this
again.
Was very enlightening.
I liked it a lot, and hopefully we'll see each other soon again in person or online. So again, thanks a lot. All right. Thank you, and see you next time.
See you.
Bye-bye.